I am absolutely thrilled to be here. Hi, I'm Joe Himmeley, and today I'm at the National Capital Trolley Museum in Colesville, Maryland, and I have a special guest. And this is our special guest. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Eric Madison, and I am the Executive Director at the National Capital Trolley Museum.
And do you have the good fortune of being able to operate these?
Yes, I've actually been a member here since 1998, so I've had a lot of opportunities to operate cars like this.
And you can show us all the details here?
Yes, I'd be happy to.
All right, let's go.
If you look at all of the switches that are used on a PCC car, they go from left to right with the switches that you would use more frequently on the left side of the gang board, and then the less frequent switches are on the far right. So starting with number one switch, of course, is the gong, because that's the one you're going to use the most. So that is to allow people know that you are approaching and to move out of the way. The next two switches are for the front doors to the car. Each door can open independently, so you can push the number two switch up to open the door. You can hear the air behind hissing as the door motor is pushed open. And then you pull that back when you close it. So that's the number 2 and 3 switch. The number 4 switch is actually the rear gong. And so this was a feature that was put on so that if an operator is turning a corner, they can let the motorist behind them know that the body of the car is swinging out towards them by ringing the rear gong, just to give them a little bit of warning. And then the number 5 switch is for the fan that's directly behind my head. So that provides a little bit of air circulation for the operator. It does not provide air circulation for the passengers, unfortunately. And then the number 6 switch is actually a feature that is not on this car. This is the next car light, and so for PCCs that came to Washington later, in the like 45 and from then on, they have an exterior light out on the front up next to the destination sign that the operator could turn on and would flash so that it would let passengers waiting at a car stop know that the car that is approaching is full and that they should wait for the next car behind them. So that does kind of give some indication that this switch, these namings that are put on here, actually came from another Washington PCC car. So this is not the set of gang switch labels that were original to 1101. Let's see, number 7 is the center door master. So this was designed so that when the car would pull up to a stop, the operator would activate the center doors. And then the way that the doors would actually open is that a passenger would step down onto a treadle pedal, and that would operate the air-operated door mechanisms so that the center doors would open. So just because I push the switch up doesn't mean that the doors will open on their own, but it is a safety feature so that the doors aren't open while the car is moving. The number 8 switch is for the auxiliary heater, which is actually right underneath the operator cab. It's this long kind of metal grate here, and so on the cooler weather, you turn this on and you can leave this on all day, and this provides a little bit of heat for the operator's feet to keep them warm. The number 9 switch, the MG, that stands for motor generator, which is the fan sound that you hear that's running the car right now. So when we turn the car on at the beginning of an operating day, we turn on the battery in the battery compartment at the rear of the car, and then we put the pole up, and then we get in the car and we push this up that turns the MG on, which keeps a charge on the battery throughout the day so that it keeps the batteries charged and running. The number 10 switch is the track switch. So on this car, if you were approaching an electric track switch in the street, the operator would hold this up to get the switch points to move. They would operate through the switch, and then they would let it go, and then the switch, after they had cleared it, would throw back to the original position, which would usually be set for going straight. The number 11 switch is the dimmer for the headlights. So when you're operating down, if you're going out towards Glen Echo, or if you're operating along Route 1 on the Route 82, you're going long distances out into the country, and say if you were operating at night, you would have the dimmer switch off for what would be considered a high beam that would be shown for distance. But if you were approaching a car stop out on one of these lines, you would push this switch up that would tilt the beam of the light down so that you're not blinding the passengers that are waiting at the car stop for you. And then as soon as you take off, you can pull the beam and the beam goes up to the high setting again. Number 12 is the headlight, of course, which operates the exterior headlight for distance. So you pull this down, that turns the light off, and then you push it up, you can turn it on. So that's for evening operation. Number 13 is the sander. So 1101 has a sanding device that drops sand on the top of the railhead whenever the wheels slip. So you can push this button and it drops a little bit of sand on the top of the rail. There's a hose that connects from the sandbox down to the top of the railhead and it drops sand. The next one is a cab heater. So there's another heater that turns on some additional heat up around the operator area that keeps the operator warm in cooler weather. And then the last switches are for the car lights. So they're each set for one side. So you've got 15 on one side of the car, and then 16, which operates the lights on the other side. So those are all of the switches that would be used. And so this makes it a lot easier because one, everything is labeled, because on older cars, sometimes the switches weren't labeled, so the operator had to know what the switches were. And it puts everything at your fingertips, so as you're operating the car, you don't have to look around for switches and handles to pull. Everything is right at your fingertips.
So Eric, what are these three things here?
So these are just some indicator gauges that help you kind of keep an eye on what the situation of the car is. The first one is the voltmeter. And this is what keeps, we are monitoring the amount of voltage for the batteries that are on the rear of the car. So usually we're operating between about 34 and 36 volts. That's a good number of voltage to keep on the voltmeter. So anytime it goes below that, that usually lets you know you've got some sort of a mechanical issue, and you let the maintenance know that something's going on. Okay. This middle light here is just an indicator light. It usually stays on while the car is moving, but right now we're sitting stationary, so it stays off. But if you're having any kind of thing, if something happens with the pole or something, this light would let you know if anything's going on. It also lets you know that you've still got power.
Okay.
This far right one is the air pressure gauge. This is a very important one because it tells you how much air pressure you have on the car. For normal operating, we can operate with as little as 50 pounds of pressure. But normally the gauge itself runs up between like 70 and 90 pounds. And so on this car, you can hear that fan, that MG set, and the air compressor keeps running all while the car is moving, but it makes sure that you've got enough air pressure to operate the brakes and the doors.
Got it. Eric, what is all of this going on here?
So these are part of the fare collection system for the car. So this is a change maker. So at one time, transit operators used to actually make change when passengers would board the car. So you would keep in here usually some quarters, dimes, nickels, tokens. And so if you boarded the car and you paid a little more than what your fare actually was, the transit operator would actually give you change. So these just push down independently, and they would dispense some coins that you would give back to the passenger. And so they might put some of the change in the fare box, or they may put a dollar bill here. But that's what this is for. This panel on the back is just a place where this would be mounted.
Gotcha. And so the fare box, what's going on here? You can see inside, and the operator would then know what amount of fare was dropped in?
Right. So the fare you could either pay with usually a cash token or a cash fare, or tokens, or sometimes you would pay with actual dollar bills if you had it, or tickets even in some cases. So it has a window on the side so that the operator can verify that you've dropped in money, you haven't dropped in a slug or something like that. And then this little slot here on the side would be used to put dollar bills. And then once all the money had been collected, so if you had a number of passengers board at one stop, the last passenger gets on, they drop their fare in the box, you verified that the fare is accurate, and then you push this lever down, and it drops the fare down into the box at the bottom where it would stay until the end of your shift. And then when you bring the car back to the car barn, they would come and take the money out and take it to the accounting office to be counted to make sure that you don't come up short.
Gotcha. And now over here, this looks like an incredible piece of equipment there, and there's some little coiled up thing there. What's that?
So this first device is a safety feature. This is the handbrake for the car. So when we don't have air pressure to keep the brakes applied, we use this, which is just a mechanical brake that's attached to a linkage, which is represented by this chain here. So right now you can see the chain is in the down position, which means that the handbrake is applied. Before we move the car out of the barn, we have to release the handbrake, and in order to do that, we pull this small handle with the ball on the end, and when you pull it, it makes a very loud thunk sound, but that lets you know that the handbrake has been released. Once we're done with the operating day and we bring the car back in and we release all the air and everything, we set the handbrake again by pulling this longer handle, which is right here, and it makes this ratcheting sound. And you just pull it while you ratchet the chain back down to a down position, and then when you feel tension on the chain, that's when you know you've got enough tension that the handbrake will hold the car and prevent it from rolling.
Okay.
And then the last device over here is more of a feature for operator comfort. What this does is that when it unfurls, you pull it across over to this stanchion here, and you can attach it. And so what it does is it keeps what heat that's being generated by the cab heaters up around in this area. So as the operator is opening and closing the doors all day, they don't get too cold from the wind coming in from the cold weather.
And now down here at your feet, what's going on down here?
So these are the pedals. So this is where you operate the car to actually get the car to move and stop. So going from left to right, the first pedal is what's referred to as a dead man. This pedal has to be pressed down while the car is moving. And so this is one of the features that allows the car to be operated with just one person versus a two-person car with an operator and a conductor. So as long as that pedal's down, the car will operate safely. The middle pedal is the brake pedal. So similar to your car, this is what's used to actually stop the car. And then the far right pedal is the power pedal. So this would be like the gas pedal in your car, but this power pedal takes the power from the overhead wire down through the electric motors, and so this is what you use to operate the car to give it power to make it go forward or backwards if you need to.
And so you would have to press the dead man pedal and the power pedal at the same time in order for the car to move.
Right, so all of these pedals are interlocked. So if you release any of these pedals incorrectly, you will also activate the electric track brake. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate how you would release the brakes in a normal operating setting. So the first thing you do is you would place your right foot on the brake just to put some tension on it so you're not pressing down on it.
Okay.
You put your left foot on the dead man, and when you press down, you can release the brake. Oh, actually, there's one other thing I need to do before I do that, which also guarantees the safety of the car, is I have to actually put the reverser key in position first. So the other piece of the operating of the car is the reverser key. This is what it's referred to as reverser because it actually controls the direction of the car, whether I want to go forward or backward. So I have to put this pedal in, put the reverser key in first, and which was what will allow me to use the foot pedals. So I put the reverser key down here at the bottom, and you can see there's a slight round shape, and the reverser key presses in. And so you can see when that buzzer goes off, I've just gone into emergency, which means that the pedals weren't set correctly. But now the pedals are set. I can pull the reverser key forward if I want to go in forward. I then place my right foot on the brake, my left foot on the dead man, and then when I press down on the dead man and I take my foot off the brake, you're going to hear a slight whoosh of air, which means that the brakes on the car, the air brakes, have been released and the car is ready to be moved forward. When I want to stop, I just press down on the brake, and then if I want to set the car so that I'm about to get off the car or I'm about to leave the car, I press down just a little past the normal service position. I take my left foot off the dead man slowly. I take my right foot off the dead man, and you can hear the air again, and now the air brakes are set and the car won't move. If I'm leaving the car, I pull the reverser key all the way back to the reverse position. This is also the position where you can pull the reverser key out. And at this point, the car and the pedals are locked, so if someone gets on the car and tries to take the car, they can't do it because the pedals are locked.
above you, you have a mirror. Is that just to put on your makeup, or what is that for?
Well, the purpose of the mirror is a couple of things. So one, you can use it to just check on the passengers, especially when they are alighting the car, if they're exiting from the center doors. You can also see, make sure that all the passengers are behaving themselves. But the other feature about the mirror is that if we're operating using the overhead wire and the trolley pole, I can check the position of the rope to make sure that the rope is following the car in the right direction. So if I get to a track switch and I head in one direction with the car, but the rope goes onto another wire and I can see the trolley pole is going to another wire, I can stop the car in time before the pole actually comes off of the wire and may potentially do some damage to either the pole or the overhead wire. I can run back, reset the pole, and then get back on the car and then keep going.
So up here I see that they have their pledge, and what is this little slot for?
So the little slot there is designed that whoever is operating the car, they would put their name
so
in
they
that
sort of
little
slide
slot.
it in like
Yes.
that.
So
Gotcha.
that way, if you if you had either a positive experience or an unpleasant experience with an operator, you could make sure that you got their name and either write a comment to the company, either praising their service or complaining about their service.
Gotcha. And here we have a number 580. What is that?
That is what's referred to as a block number, and so the block numbers are on all of the cars that were operating in revenue service. This was a way that you could kind of track where the car was. So if you are a street supervisor and you're standing out on a street corner and you're just checking to make sure that the cars are operating on time, you're going to be looking at that 3-digit number that will tell you that this car, block 580, is supposed to be at this time point at a certain time. In some places like Toronto, where if the car is is running behind schedule, they will actually loop the car around or short turn it to send it back in the other direction to keep it on schedule.
Huh.
This was just one way to make sure that the cars were operating on time and that the on-time performance was monitored.
Wow. So tell me about these windows. They don't crank up and down, they go in and out. Can you tell me about that?
Yes, so this serves a couple of purposes. One, the PCC cars, when they were first introduced, did not have air conditioning. So 1101, for all of its new features, it does not have air conditioning. So one way that they tried to combat that problem was to put in these sort of hinged windshields that would allow air to kind of scoop into the car as the car is going down the street. So on the left side, I have one window that would open out. So if you're the operator, you're going to get some wind coming in this way. And then also, you've got the windshields here that actually open out from the bottom. This keeps it somewhat safe because you don't have a fully open screen where you have to worry about bugs or debris flying in, but you've got the safety of the glass from the windshield, but you're still able to get some air coming in from the car as it's moving. But this whole system only works when the car is moving. So if you're stopping every other block and it's a summer day, it can be pretty warm on you.
And the last thing up at the front is this. There are two little controls, two little switches there. What is that all about?
So this whole cabinet up here is the destination sign. So on the left side here, we've got the longer sign. This is where you would actually have the name of the route that the car is operating on. And then the cabinet to the right contains where the route numbers are. So I'm going to open these. These are just two little hinges that are designed to lift up. So I'm going to pull this and turn this just a little bit to adjust it so we get it in the right position. And one other thing, I'm going to open over here because all of this opens together. So I pull this up, give it a little turn just to get it in the right spot. So now you can see I have full access to the destination sign. So if I want to adjust the destination, we get to the end of the line and we're going back in the other direction. If we're heading back to 14th in Colorado, I would get to the end of the line and I would turn the sign using this crank. And then over here, same with the route number. If I'm on a 50 and let's say I'm switching to a turnback or a 50 slash, I can use that to turn each one of these numbers individually. So it turns the numbers of 51. So when you got to the end of the line, you always had to remember because you didn't want to set the route for the wrong direction. But that's what this feature is for. You can see the bulbs inside illuminate the sign so that passengers can see it from the outside.
I notice, Eric, that there are these two doors. What's that all about?
So this is cabinets where the passengers normally wouldn't see it, but if you have any mechanical issues and you have to troubleshoot, these give you access to the fuses on the car.
Wow.
And so if you look inside, you can see you've got, on one side you've got a schematic that tells you all about the fuses and what's in here. So this usually should match up with what's in here. And then over here, this sheet over here is for operators. So if you're having any trouble, these are some troubleshooting tips that you can start with. And if you're having any more major issues, you would probably have to radio in or notify the company to send out a maintenance truck. But this is just kind of if you're out on the line somewhere and you just need to do some quick troubleshooting, you've got something that'll tell you, a schematic that'll tell you what the fuses are, and then a troubleshooting kind of cheat sheet to kind of help you if you can just do some basic stuff.
One other question. When I look back at these fuses, are these original fuses? I mean, can you still buy these?
Yes, so we have to kind of do a bit of a search now because some of these fuses are becoming harder to find. But we try to get these wherever we can find them. So whenever we can find a supplier, we try to order as many as we can because we always want to have a supply in stock so that if one goes out, we can put another one in that'll at least last us for a few years before we have to go looking for new fuses again.
Gotcha. So Eric, that's all the controls at the front, but what is this hanging down? There's like a leather strap. What's that?
So this is a feature that you would use if you're an operator and you're operating the car at night. So this is a night screen, and it is designed where you pull it down, and then you take the leather clasp and you wrap it around, and then you twist it just to turn it in place. And what this does is it holds the screen in position and it eliminates the glare from the interior lights so that as you're going down the street, you're not getting the glare from the lights that are inside the car, and you have better visibility when you're looking outside of the car.
So now we're at the front of the car. Can you tell me what all of these things are on the side and on the seats? Is there anything special we should know?
Sure. So what we have here is another destination sign. So this is a side destination sign. So this would be for passengers that are coming up along the side of the car. They can tell what route the car is on, and it should match what's on the front of the car. So this is set for Bureau of Engraving, so it's set for 14th Street. This red cord is the signal or the bell cord. So for passengers that want to get off the car at their next stop, they would just pull this. That gives a tone to the operator to know that at the next stop the passengers want to get off, and then they would exit through the center doors.
Okay. And then what's this? It looks like we're in a prison here with these.
So these bars are a safety feature because remembering that streetcars used to run down the middle of the street, so they would often pass each other very close together. So this was an attempt to prevent people from sticking their hands or arms outside of the car, and they would put these bars on the window either on both sides or on one side of the car that was on the inside. Of course, this does add a new hazard that if you have to do an emergency exit or an emergency evacuation, these are screwed in, so this prevents an emergency evacuation, unfortunately.
Right. Well, it looks like this is a window handle. Does this crank the window up and down?
Yes, so if you are old enough to remember when cars still had manual windows, this would have been a feature that would have been common. So this is what you use to crank the window up to get more air into the car, or you would crank the window down to lower the window if you have too much air. So this was a standard feature on PCC cars. You can still see these on some of the older cars today. In some cities like Philadelphia, they've removed this mechanism. So the mechanism, the gearing is still in behind, but they've replaced some of these with school bus type windows where you just press the sides and let them lower it.
Gotcha. And it looks like there's a gap here. Is there actually a gap behind there?
Yeah, so if you notice that the side, it comes down and it curves out right here. In the original design of the car, this would have held a window shade that the passenger could use. They would have a little pinch button here. They could pinch it and then pull the shade down if there's too much glare. We've taken ours out, or these were taken out at some point in the car's history. So by the time it came out here, this was already gone. But if you still want to see this feature in use, you can actually go to the Baltimore Streetcar Museum, and their PCC car actually still has this feature in it.
Oh, well, that's a trip I'll have to make next. So now we're in the center of the car, and there's this odd box here. What is that all about?
So this is a feature that would have been used if you were operating the car and for some reason you got caught in what we refer to as a dead spot. So this is if you're operating on the conduit track and you get to a track switch and for whatever reason somebody cuts you off in traffic or something, and you stop and you're over a spot in the conduit track where there is no power collection. So your car is sitting there dead, as it were. What's behind here is the mechanism where you could use, you could plug in cables to essentially give your car a jump, kind of like you would do with your battery, but it would give you just enough power to get the car moving off of that dead spot. So sometimes if that happened, you would have to wait for a truck from the transit company to come out and what we refer to in the industry as sting you off the dead spot. The only other thing that you could do if you were in that case, and it wasn't, I don't think it was the approved company policy, but you could also wait for the car that was coming along behind you to pull up close behind you and then meet up with you and then give you a slight push with their car off of the dead spot. But that's what's behind this cabinet, and this is what's used to jump the car or sting it if we get caught in a dead spot on the track.
Cool. So Eric mentioned that these steps here are actually a treadle, and if you step on them, you can actually feel them move up and down, and this is what would actually activate the door to open if the master switch were turned on. So now we're in the center of the car, and I see that there's an emergency escape here. Is that what this door is for?
Well, actually, this is the hatch cover that it gives you access to the plow hanger that's on the bottom of the car.
And wait, what's a plow hanger?
So a plow hanger is what when we pull this off, you'll see that there's going to be this frame that sticks out from the rear of the truck, and that will be where the plow for the car would hang, and the plow itself is used to collect the power for the conduit. So this is where you would operate on conduit power. You would have this plow hanging below street level, and it kind of moves along while the car is moving. And then when you would get to a location where you would switch from conduit to overhead, there would be a pitman who would take that plow, physically remove it from the bottom of the car, go around to the back and put the pole up so the car could continue on its route using overhead. And then they would do the same thing in reverse when the car was coming into the district switching from the overhead wire to the conduit operation.
Gotcha. Is there any chance I could get you to open that up? I'm sure it's tricky to open.
Yes, this is slightly heavy, but it's not too bad. So you pull this latch up like this, and then you pull it back, and then you give it a little turn, and then you set this off to the side.
And I'm guessing we probably shouldn't touch these two wires.
Not at this point, because this is all, you figure all of this is, electrically powered right now, so you don't want to touch it. But if you look down, and you can see there is kind of a rectangular shaped lip on this end of the truck, and then one right behind it, right across from there. So those are the two hangers. So the plow would hang perpendicular to these hangers. And so as it's going down the street, that plow is sitting dead center, dropping straight down and collecting the power.
Gotcha.
When they got to a plow pit, it was designed that the conductor rail would be turned slightly so that when the car would move over that section of rail slowly, it would start to twist the plow to give the pitman a little bit of an advantage so that they didn't have to do it all by themselves. They would start to twist that plow. The pitman would take that plow off.
Right.
These two plugs here are what we refer to as the power leads. These would be plugged into the top of the plow while the car is using conduit.
Right.
When they take that off and they switch to overhead, they would plug these leads in as they are right now, and then they would go to the rear of the car and put the trolley pole up.
Gotcha.
They would give the operator a signal, and then the car would continue on using the overhead wire.
So now we're on the back of the train. It looks like we have a little handle here. Is this removable?
Yes, this is removable, and this is what gives the operator access to the backup controller. So when I lift this out, and I set the cushion aside, you can see I have essentially a set of kind of rudimentary controls that could be used to run the car in reverse from the back of the car. That way it's a little safer than having to do it from the front, so I don't have to look through all the mirrors and everything. But what I've got here, going from left to right, kind of similar, I've got this red button here is the dead man. So similar to the dead man on the front of the car, I have to hold this down while I'm moving the car.
Okay.
This next middle button is the rear gong, but I have to, it only works when I've got the reverser key in this position here. But if I were about to pull the car out, I would press this down. I would press that rear gong 3 times to indicate that we're going backwards. And then that same reverser key that I used at the front of the car would go into this position here. It would stick up at a 90-degree angle. And then I could pull and take up to maybe 3 points of power, usually never more than 1, but just get enough power to get the car backed out. So when we bring the car out for an operating day, we usually get the doors open and we come back here to run the car in reverse all the way out to our main switch, and then we can throw the switch. and then go to the front of the car, and then run the car in normal direction going forward.
Awesome. So one last thing on the inside, what are all of these little slots for?
So this is part of the ventilation system for the car. So remember, there is no air conditioning on this car. So when these cars were designed, they were trying to maximize air circulation as much as they could. So on the roof of the car, we have some air vents that are designed to scoop the air and channel the air down along the length of the car, and then they would exhaust out the rear of the car. So as the air is coming down, it's going to exhaust through here. It's also going to exhaust on the sides here, and you've also got your windows that are open on both sides to try to get as much air flowing through the car as you can.
Gotcha. So Eric, we're here at the front of the PCC car, and the door is closed, and we need to get in. How do you even get in when the door is closed?
So there is actually a feature underneath the car. It was not part of the factory installation. This was a feature that we added later. But right underneath the fender here, there is a switch that you feel underneath, and then when you feel the switch, you pull it to the left, and that operates the first leaf of the door, and so you can enter the car, and then you can close the doors from inside. If you've left the car and you're coming back into the visitor center and you're done, you come back, you go back to the same position, you reach down, and you flip the switch back to the original position, and that closes the door.
And how did it work before you included this switch?
So before, you had to make sure that you left either the windshield, one of the windshields loose,
right?
And then you could reach in, and you had to remember which position was the door switch. And you count like 1, 2, or 1, 2, 3, and then you would push the switch on the gang switch, and that would open one of the doors.
Wow. So you better make sure nobody accidentally locked the windows.
Right.
Yeah. There are so many features on the front of this. Can you go over everything about the front of the car?
Sure. Well, we've already covered the destination sign and the block number, but if we go down below the windshield, the first thing you see are these additional lights, which we refer to as track lights. So if you're operating at night, especially when you're approaching a track switch, and you want to make sure that the points of the switch are set so that you're going in the right direction, you would kind of coast up to the switch points slowly, just so close enough that you've got enough light from these shining down onto the ends of the switch. And then once you verified that the switches are thrown properly, you can either proceed. But that's just another safety feature. It also illuminates some more of the front of the car too.
So this light is strategically placed directly above the track.
Right, so as you get closer, it'll be kind of approximately right over the top of the rail.
Gotcha. And then this, I assume, is just the main light for the cabin. Is there anything special about that?
No, this is the headlight for the car. This is really kind of an automotive sealed beam headlight that you would have seen on automobiles from that time. Like I said earlier, it has a high and a low setting, or a dimmer switch. But this is kind of a typical look, a position of where you would have seen headlights on streetcars at that time. They were usually placed right in the center, because if you're looking out at the track and the light is going out on the track, it can show as much of the track as possible.
Okay. And what about this?
So this is what we use if we have to tow or push another streetcar. This is what we use to hook up the tow bar itself. And so the tow bar itself is just basically it's a pole that has 2 holes on one end. You take one end and you put it right in this location here, and you line up the holes, and then you drop the pin, which is what this is referred to, and then you do the same thing for the car that you're either pushing or towing. Now this does require a certain amount of skill from the operator, because you have to get the car up close enough that you can get the holes lined up, but not so much that you actually hit the car and damage it itself. So
a delicate operation.
It's a very delicate operation.
And these are nice decorative little details here.
Yes, so this feature, if you notice that there are these this whole fender is kind of ribbed, so this bumper is ribbed. This is what we refer to as an anti-climber or an anti-climber. And it's designed so that if you look at the design of the PCC cars, it's just a curved body. So if this weren't here and 2 PCC cars had any kind of a collision, there's a chance that the car that is striking might climb or ride up on the back of the other car or derail. This is designed so that if it collides with another streetcar or another PCC streetcar, these are designed to kind of lock the cars in position so that they may still collide, but they don't derail and they don't climb each other.
Gotcha. So it's not an anti-climb so that people can't climb up the car. It's the climb to make sure that the entire trolley itself doesn't raise or lower if it runs into another one.
That's
so
correct.
There's one more thing. I see this. This looks like a cow catcher. Is that what this is?
Yeah, so this is what we'd refer to either as a life catcher, or in some of the earlier cars that were referred to as cow catchers. But the basic design is that this is hinged, and it's also connected to a kind of a wooden basket or a set of rack of wood that's behind the car. And so if there's something obstructing the car, it would hit this first, and then it would drop that wood basket behind to keep whatever is out from going underneath the wheels. This kind of design evolved over time. If you looked at streetcars from the late 18 and early 1900s, it was literally a kind of a wire mesh basket that was mounted onto the front of the car.
Right.
And it was designed to scoop the person up. So there's some old footage out there where they demonstrate this, where a poor man is standing in the middle of the track, the streetcar comes along, and it scoops him up and his hat goes flying off in another direction. So this was an attempt to have that same feature, but to hide it so it makes it look a little bit more aesthetically pleasing.
Gotcha. On the side of the car, there's this mirror, but it's facing off in the middle of nowhere. What is the purpose of that?
So this mirror is actually designed, it's hinged so that when the front door opens, it actually pushes the mirror out and it shines it down the length of the car, so that if you're the operator, you can see down the length of the car to make sure that your passengers are alighting properly and safely, or that no one's trying to board the car from the
All right, so I see the big wheels here, but it looks like this is just a straight rod. What is this for?
So that long bar that you see in the middle is referred to as a track brake. So that's one of the braking systems that's used on the PCC car. Earlier when we were on the car and the buzzer went off, what was also happening underneath the car was that this track brake was becoming energized, and it is essentially a large magnet. And so when it's energized, it grips the top of the rail and it produces the amount of force that keeps the car from moving. So if you're going down the street and you slam on the brakes, and there are 4 of these, one on, 2 on the front, 2 on the rear, these brakes would become energized and grip the top of the rail and aid in kind of slowing the car down faster than it would if you were just using the other braking systems.
And the other braking system was air brakes?
Yeah, so kind of going in order, if you were pressing down the brake pedal, you've got dynamic braking first, which is just using the electric traction motors in reverse to slow the car down.
Okay.
And then as you press the brake pedal down, you transition over into the mechanical brakes, which are operated using the air system. And if those aren't enough, then you press the pedal all the way down, which would energize the car.
So here above the brake and the wheels, there's this really nice decoration here. Is this strictly decorative, or is there a purpose to this?
No, there is a purpose to it. This is actually one of the locations on the car where it is safe to put a jack. So if you ever had to lift up the car body, say if we have to remove the trucks or do any work underneath, we can put a jack on one of these. There's 4 of these again, 2 on the front, 2 on the rear, and you would put 4 jacks around each side, and you could lift the car up safely with using these jacks and using these jacking points.
Gotcha, kind of like changing the tire on a car.
Exactly.
So I know I can't do it, but I really want to flip these down and climb up. Is that what these were for originally, Eric?
Yes, this is used to get roof access to the cars. So if the car were ever having any mechanical issue on the roof, you could fold these down, and they kind of function both as a hand grab and also as a footstep. So you would grab the topmost, you put your foot on the lower one, and then you climb up until you can grab the handle and then get up onto the roof of the car. So
I could go like this and then like this and then climb up.
Right.
Gotcha. Okay, now we're at the back of the car, and there seems to be a lot going on here. Starting at the very top, what is that all the way at the very top?
So at the very top, that is the trolley pole. This is what allows the car to collect the power from the overhead wire. So at the very end of that, the part that's actually touching the wire itself, we refer to that as the harp. That has a little carbon slider in it that can be replaced over time.
Okay.
But that is at the very end, and then you've got the pole, which runs down to the roof of the car, but it also carries some of the wiring that would connect all the way down to the motors and provide power to get to the electric motors.
So that pole actually has electricity running through it.
Yes, so you typically don't want to touch it.
Right. I won't touch
the
it.
car.
Okay, and then it's got this rope on it. That seems odd to me. Why do you want to have a rope?
This is a rope, so this is what you can use to raise and lower the pole. So if I pull the pole down slightly, you'll hear everything will stop and the lights will go out.
Oh, it sparks too.
There's a little bit of arc because there's a little bit of electricity.
Right.
And then, if I let it up slowly.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you can hear it start back up again, yeah.
So a lot of systems, especially in Washington towards the end of streetcar service, when they were no longer operating on routes that had overhead wire, they actually cut these ropes.
Huh.
So the poles, the trolley poles, were just in the down position, and they were really decorative because by 1960 or so, there was only conduit operation, so they weren't using these anyway.
Gotcha. And this bell, is this the bell that rings, or what is this?
No, this is actually the trolley catcher or the retriever, depending on what the purpose is. But this is what keeps tension in the rope, so it takes up any of the slack in the rope. And there's a mechanism in here that's designed, that's spring-loaded, and it turns, so as the car goes down the track with the overhead wire, as the wire rises and falls, it lets out or takes up rope so that it keeps the pole from getting too slack and getting caught on any of the hardware that's hanging off the back here.
Gotcha. And so these are just regular tail lights like they would be on any other car.
Right. These are just regular Marco lights. And then these are your stop lights. I love this feature that they actually put stop.
Right.
So when you're going down the street, these would always be on, but then when you would apply the brake, these lights actually brighten.
Oh, okay.
So to let motorists know that the car is stopping.
Gotcha. And what is this? It looks like we've got another storage cabinet here.
So back here is actually where the battery cabinet. So you can see we've got the 4 batteries, which you can see are golf cart batteries.
Right.
But this switch over here is the knife switch. So when we're starting the car at the end of the day, or starting the car at the beginning of the day, the first thing we do is we come back here and we actually engage that knife switch. So we pull that knife switch down into the position that it's in right now, which means that now we've turned on the batteries. We put the trolley pole up next, and then the last thing we do is we get into the car and we turn on the MG set.
Gotcha. And does this thing slide out?
Yes, actually there are pins that hold the brake.
Oh, I see. These pins right here.
Yep. So when we have to do any maintenance work on the batteries, we can pull those pins out, and this whole tray slides out so that you can get full access to the batteries without having to reach in. And the rear gong is right there.
Right there, sure enough. Here under the anti-climber on the rear is another, I assume this is for towing? What is this?
Yes, so 1101 actually has its own tow bar, which you can see it's painted the same color as the car, but it has its own compartment that it can carry that. So you just slide the tow bar in, so you can always carry a tow bar with you if you need one. And then whenever you need it, you can just pull this out, and then you can use it to tow or push a car.
So this is a special feature on this one that's not common on the PCCs?
I think there may be some others, but I mean, for the cars that we have here at the museum, this one is on 1101 and maybe on the other Washington cars, but this is not a feature that's typical on all of the PCCs that we have.
I wanted to thank Eric so much for this amazing tour of the PCC car. I'm Joe Himmeley, and I hope that you'll like, subscribe, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss my next video.